Hello everyone, Cianter here with the next part of my Guild Wars 1 skill review project. We have finished all of the core prophecies professions, so we're now moving into the factions professions. I'm going to start with the assassin, as some of you may have been able to guess what with this assassin here. So there's a number of unique mechanics to the assassin, some of which have been branched out a little bit into, specifically shadow stepping. But there's a couple of important mechanics to discuss about the assassin. Now, of those, and the reason why I'm up here, I'm going to start by talking about Shadow Steps. So Shadow Steps are a sort of teleport type move. I'll demonstrate it in just a moment using Aura of Displacement here. So Aura of Displacement allows me to Shadow Step to target foe. It is a maintained enchantment. Assassins have a small handful of those. That's a mechanic that we saw first in the monk profession. Assassin, I think, is the only other profession to have any of them. And the way that they work is you basically spend a pip of energy, in this case energy degeneration, so you lose a pip of energy regeneration in order to maintain the enchantment, and it persists on you until you end it or it's removed through some other enchantment removal spell. So Shadow Steps are not true teleports. They do have some pathing involved, so you cannot use them to get to places that the game can't figure out how to path you to. So if I were to click down there, and I had click to move on, here, let me turn that on really quickly so I can, let's see, where is click to move? Whatever, it doesn't matter. Okay, so I have this foe selected. If I hit spacebar, my character will start running off because the game has figured out how to path to that enemy. This is really important. If the game cannot figure out how to path you to that enemy, so if you could not run up to it, you cannot shadow step to it. So it's not a true teleport. There is some check there to prevent you from teleporting wherever you want over across boundaries and stuff. So you have to be able to... The game has to be able to figure out how to walk you there, and that means that there has to be a certain closeness of path and things like that. So if you go to an area, I'm not sure if, this right here, I'm trying to walk to the Student of Days. The game can't figure out how to actually path me there. All it can do is get me closer on this area. So if I tried to shadow step to it, it doesn't work. It doesn't help that I'm not in spellcasting range, but if I had something... like right there. I've tried to use it. I didn't teleport to them. That's because the game cannot figure out how to path me there. It's too far. That stands in contrast to over here. These guys, if I do that, it starts running off towards the stairs. The AI starts running towards the stairs. So in just a few seconds, when Aura of Displacement finishes recharging, I can shadow step to it. So now I've teleported up to the enemy. So there are a number of different styles of shadow steps. This is one. There's a bunch that take you to enemies. There's a class of them. So for example, Viper's Defense here shadow steps me away from my enemy. It also happens to poison everyone. Assassins have a lot of sort of degeneration themes. So they play with with poison and bleed quite a lot. There's a few degeneration hexes as well. So that's kind of one of the properties that Assassins have, is this Shadow Step mechanic. Now, there's a few other things that are Shadow Steps that have been sort of sprinkled in a few places, but for the most part, Assassin is the one that has them. So there's another really important mechanic here. And so if you look at my attack skills here, you see this, like... If I bring this up, this sort of silver, or this sort of goldish, bronzish bar, and this sort of silvery irony bar. And then these guys have these lines across them. So there's a whole system to attacks. Now, Assassin, as a profession, it tends to be very single target focused. It is not as strongly oriented towards area of effect as some of the other professions may be. There is still some really good Death Blossom skills for area of effect, Death Blossom being a really good one. But the Assassin has this whole mechanic of lead, offhand, and dual attack. So these are a mark that you place on an enemy. So for example, if I go up to this guy and I hit him with this skill, now he has that sort of, this genderless barrel has a mark on them. Now you'll notice that this skill, Wild Strike, which had that mark on it, became available. Now that mark is worn off, is no longer available. So the way that this works is skills will have these markers indicating what type they convey. So, for example, Death Blossom is a dual attack. It has a dual attack icon. Twisting Fangs is also a dual attack. And then they have a little bar for what type they require. So, for example, Wild Strike requires a lead attack, and it is an offhand attack, so it will leave the offhand mark on an enemy, which is basically a little notifier effect that persists for a little period of time. So I use this. That enemy is marked. This enemy is not, right? But this enemy is, so I can come back to them and I can start using some of my other moves. Now, one of the things that you'll notice is I occasionally get these +2 energy pop-ups. That's from my primary attribute. I'll go into that in a moment. But anyway, this whole system of attacks means that you focus your attack skills on a single target. You can't just be like, I'm hitting you, and then I'm switching over to this guy, because you have to wait for whatever your start of your attack chain is. So assassins are very attack chain oriented. The other thing that they're very oriented towards is critical hits. So their primary attribute is called critical strikes, and it increases their critical hit chance by 1% for each point in critical strikes. But also, when you make a critical hit, you gain energy. So starting at 3 ranks, you gain 1 energy whenever you critical hit. You get 2 at 8 ranks and above, and 3 at 13 and above. So most of the time, you want at least 8 critical strikes, because it's an important part of your energy management as an assassin. Assassin's skills are all energy cost. They don't have, well, except for Xigneous, they don't use adrenaline like some of the other physical attacking professions do. Rather, they have an energy management primary attribute here that allows them to be able to recover their energy and increase their critical hit chance. Of course, you get more critical hit chance with speccing into your weapon attribute, which is Dagger Mastery. But they have a few things that will trigger on critical hits, so it's kind of a sub-theme. Way of Perfection is an example. This will gain me 32 health whenever I land a critical hit, so every now and then you will see that pop up. So that's an aspect of the profession. They have a number of skills that relate to that sort of stuff as well. And then they will also have things that are not dual attacks, or not attacks that will require offhand attack status or things like that. And one of the other things as well is when you apply a mark, it overwrites the previous one. So I have 2 dual attacks on my skill bar. I have Twisting Fangs and Death Blossom. If I apply the offhand mark, which this enemy now has, is the sort of X, you can see that Death Blossom and Twisting Fangs are active, but as soon as I use one of them, the other one becomes inactive. Now, one of the other attributes of dual attacks, specifically, is that dual attacks will hit twice. So that's a really significant property of them, and that's a property of daggers more generally. So if we look under Dagger Mastery, it says that it influences your daggers and damage hit and critical hit chance with daggers, but it also says there's a 2% chance per rank of Dagger Mastery that attacks from your daggers will double strike. So what this means is, when you'll see right here, like, well, this is a fancy axe that looks double, but these are daggers. These are also daggers, randomly enough, these brass knuckles. But these are the daggers. I have one in each hand, unlike a traditional weapon. For like warrior or whatever, you don't have dual wielding swords. So when I attack, there's a chance, pretty good one, there's about a 30% chance right now that I'll get a double attack, like that. See, so some of these are double attacks where I basically temporarily double my attack rate by hitting with the other hand. So this effect allows the assassin daggers to potentially hit a little bit more often, get a little bit more damage in, it's a way of speeding up the attack rate without speeding up the attack rate, if that makes sense, because it's inserting extra attacks on a percent chance basis. And dual attacks always double hit. So that's something that's really important when you're evaluating a dual attack. It doesn't hit once, it hits twice. So that makes something like Death Blossom here, which deals area of effect damage. You can see that it did 90 damage to that thing, because it does 45 damage to all adjacent foes per hit, and it does 2 hits. So that's a couple of important like skill-based mechanics. The other attribute lines, so I talked about Dagger Mastery and Critical Strikes already. The other attribute lines are Deadly Arts and Shadow Arts. So neither of these have inherent effects, obviously. They're all kind of assisting skills. So Deadly Arts tends to be more offensive, more debilitating, more focused on tearing down the enemy. Shadow Arts tends to be more about protecting yourself, providing some additional benefits. They're both got some trickery aspects to them. The Assassin, as a profession, actually has some of the highest levels of like self-defensive abilities. It has a lot of that sort of self-reliant, go-it-alone sort of traits to it, which actually contributed to being extremely powerful for like solo farming and speed clears and things like that. The Assassin profession is actually quite powerful. It wasn't originally, when the game Guild Wars Factions first came out, both Assassin and Ritualist, the two professions released in that, were actually kind of underpowered, as I remember, which wasn't great because everybody was making an Assassin, naming it Naruto. Factions, for those who are unfamiliar, has a very Asian theme to it. So the Assassin is kind of a ninja, except ninja or shinobi, same word, are kind of the Japanese concept for an assassin, as far as I understand it. So there's very much so that flavor about the assassin. So everybody's making one named Naruto. Nobody knew how to play assassins yet. They would run up to the enemies, they'd shadow step into them and cause themselves to overextend, to get killed and blame the monks. It was, if you could find them, you're having to get rituals for healers. But it was a whole mess. But these days, Assassin is quite strong, and has a lot of useful versatility with some of the things it can do, and can actually do a good bit of damage while also tanking quite well. Now, I should go ahead and go into some of the equipment. So, I've mentioned Assassins use daggers. Daggers deal 7 to 17 damage, so their raw damage is actually kind of low. They're able to hit twice with the double strikes, which means they can get slightly higher native DPS than other weapon types just from the sort of frequency of hits, but their damage is actually quite low because most of the damage from Assassins comes from getting the benefit of very high plus damage on the dagger attack skills. Now, I have 15, so the numbers are especially high right now, but that is... Okay, I have 15 Dagger Mastery, so that makes all of these quite high. But the daggers, as a result, a lot of the damage that you can get off of them is pretty high armor ignoring as well, just because you will get reasonable numbers off of these chains. They tend to have pretty short cooldowns, or they can have rather short cooldowns. So you can actually get quite a lot of armor ignoring damage out of daggers, which is a notable thing about them. So that's their weapon. And then their armor is 70 base armor. They don't have any additional properties in terms of additional armor against something. So, like, Ranger had plus 30 armor against elements. Warriors had base 80 armor with an additional 20 against physical, as some examples. Assassin is just straight 70. And then it also has the, plus 5 energy on the chest piece. Just kind of scanning through here. The gloves do not have any additional special properties. Mine has insignia and runes, obviously. And then plus 1 energy regen on the pants and legs. So they have slightly higher energy. I have a radiant headpiece, so base 25 energy and 4 pips of regen. Again, I'm wielding Zealous Daggers, which removes a pip of regen. But means that I gain 1 energy every time I hit with an attack, which is usually preferential for attackers that are really going at it, in my personal opinion. But anyway, I digress a little bit. So that's kind of the base there, and I guess I might as well go hit up the rune trader to go over insignia. Assassins don't have any special runes. They just have the standard attribute runes. But of course, every profession has sort of a list of the insignia they get. So you can see here, they just have the standard minor, major, superior rune setup. And then they have a bunch of insignia that are very similar. So plus 10 versus physical armor, Vanguard, Infiltration, Saboteurs are all this way. And then plus 10 versus a specific damage type. So this would get you up to 90 armor against, say, blunt damage, piercing damage, or physical damage with a base of 80, which isn't bad. It gives you a little bit more durability. What you'll notice here is the 2 platinum valued one is Night Stalkers. This just raw gives you 15 armor while attacking. Assassins are usually attacking, so this is usually going to be getting you a nice chunk of additional armor. But frankly, as far as I'm concerned, assassins have enough sort of self-defensive skills that this isn't the most important thing. So Night Stalkers is just popular because it's like the most reliably effective. Honestly, I feel like you might want versus piercing the most, just because of the 3 cheaper ones, if you're getting an assassin specific one, just because that would be like bows and spears, so it'd be like ranged attacks, which feels like it would be mildly more useful. But assassins have a lot of ways of avoiding physical damage. So anyway, that's kind of the overview of the assassin profession. So we're going to go ahead and launch into it next time with, I think, critical strikes actually is first. Yep, it's first right here. So we will be talking about critical strikes. A few other notes actually before I go. Assassins are especially good at removing enchantments and stances. So they have a lot of utility for removing the defensive capabilities of their targets. So assassins are definitely designed to go after a target, prevent them from being able to stop them from hitting them, and taking them down. So that is what assassins are built to do. So anyway, until next time, take care, everyone, and goodbye.